What is the freakiest/creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? Serious? Dude. This exact same thing happened with my wife and I recently when we were at a newer restaurant in town. Although in this case the guy talking was a busboy there. He saw her baseball shirt, Chicago, and then asked what high school she went to. It was in a small suburb and we now live far away out of state. He claimed to be a recent graduate from the school, compared to my wife graduating 10 years ago, but had weird disjointed responses to references. He asked her who her favorite teacher was and when she responded he claimed he had no idea who that was and all the ones she asked about he'd either say he didn't take classes with or offer a vague "oh yeah I knew them" type responses. He provided no details on his end that would verify to me that he actually knew the small Chicago suburb or the school and there was no common understanding. At first I thought he was being flirty but then I wondered if it was some kind of scam and what he was trying to pull, especially since I was there and he was somebody that worked at the restaurant. Is this a common con trick? What's the end goal? It's a very common early start MLM tactic. It's designed to create an atmosphere of trust. He went to our school, he must be a good egg, and since it's likely that the MLM is in the early stages, you'll probably make a killing off it too. Of course, you'll do it at the expense of thousands underneath you, and alienate everyone around you who isn't narcissistic and self-absorbed. By the time you come out the other end, you'll have no reliable friends left, but you'll have a nice, big, empty house. I was alone in my house with my stepdad. I went to the bathroom. When I sat down on the toilet, that's when I saw someone was trying to open the door. I pushed it and said occupied but whatever was at the other side kept trying to open the door. I called my stepdad and I heard him from the kitchen saying "yet." At that point I was terrified. It suddenly stopped. I checked the whole house for anyone other than my stepdad, didn't find anybody. I went to the other bathroom and then used it. Still don't know what the hell was at the other side of the door. Edit. I see a lot of people saying that it was probably a burglar, my pet, or the wind. I didn't own a pet back then. 2. My stepdad was in the kitchen, which is located right beside the hallway with all the rooms, including the bathroom, so it's impossible that anyone could have sneaked to the hallway without being noticed. 3. Wind can't turn a doorknob. When I was about 5 I was visiting my grandma in the city with my mum, dad and sister. We were walking towards the city center so it was pretty crowded. I remember letting go of my dad's hand and then feeling him grab back hold of it a few moments later. I kept walking, I don't know how far. I hear my dad shouting from behind me and grabbing my other arm. I hear him say sorry and I look up and I realize I was holding hands with an old man that I didn't know. My dad assumed that I'd accidentally grabbed onto this man's hand thinking he was my dad. I remember him pulling me away all embarrassed and I was just thinking but the man grabbed my hand. So basically, I think some guy tried to snatch me out of a crowded area. I still don't understand why my dad thought I grabbed onto his hand. My parents were normally quite paranoid about strangers. He must have been distracted when talking to my grandma. I was probably 9 years old, in about 1995. At that time all the schools and parents were warning us of stranger danger. It seemed like a lot of kids were getting kidnapped because they were being tricked into helping the kidnappers find a lost pet. One day I was riding my bike alone on our street, a fairly populated street, lots of kids out playing and whatnot, and a green 2-door car pulled up with a woman driving and a guy in the passenger seat. The guy calls out the window to me, "Hey kid. We lost our dog, can you help us find her?" I can still remember the feeling I felt. It was like sirens were going off, and I thought for a split second that this was it, I was going to be kidnapped. A rush of what felt like burning hot adrenaline * through my body. I felt like I could hear everything 10x louder and see everything 10x better. I've never felt anything like that before. I hopped off my bike, pulled the front tire up so I could turn around faster, and I booked it home. I was shaking and tears were pouring down my face even though I wasn't crying. I got home and told my mom what happened. She called the police, but I'm not sure if the people were ever caught. Crazy. I would sleepwalk as a child. Usually I'd wake up in the living room, or I would freak myself out and wake up in the basement. On one occasion I had wandered outside. I was 7 or 8 and I woke up standing in the middle of my backyard on a super foggy morning right around sunrise. I quickly figured out which direction my house was and ran back to bed. I never told my parents about it because I figured they would be mad at me for going outside when I should have been asleep. One Christmas my grandparents rented 2 beach houses in Florida right next to each other and had the whole family spend a week there. One of my sisters, who we knew to sit up and talk in her sleep but had never sleepwalked to our knowledge, went to sleep in one of the beach houses and woke up in the other our first night there. After that we started locking the doors at night because the gulf was right there, maybe 50 feet from the door she would have walked out of while asleep. Sure enough, on 2 other nights she ended up waking up right at the door after apparently failing to figure out how to unlock it in her sleep. It made me wonder if there's some Gulf of Mexico equivalent to Thulhu. When I was around 5, my parents and my little brother and I rented a camper on some campground in the Florida Keys. We were in the center of the grounds, with rocky seawalls and docks just to the east of the camper. My brother was 3 and had a habit of sleepwalking, so my parents made sure the door to the camper was locked and they were sleeping towards the front anyway. One night we hear a loud rapping at our door, and when my dad opens it, a soaking wet man is holding my soaking wet toddler brother. He was fishing late at night off the dock when he heard a splash, and sure enough my brother had wandered from the camper and off the dock. The fisherman had pulled him out of the water and recognized him since the campground was small enough that you met your neighbors pretty frequently, and we had been there for a few days by that point. It still freaks me out thinking of how lucky we were some random man decided to go fishing late at night and noticed my brother bobbing in the ocean. If he hadn't been there, my baby brother would have disappeared without a trace. We moved into a new place. Built around 1930 and sometime in the 70s had a fire. My 3-year-old, at the time, started running around the house and playing hide and seek with himself. Kids weren't allowed in our room, but our room was on the first floor and the closet was actually the underside of the stairs. He kept running in there and shouting, "Found you! Hide better!" We didn't think much of it. New house. Kids have imaginary friends. Until that night when he asked if Sam could sleep in his room. He said she was lonely, but they're friends now so she can sleep with him. She doesn't want to sleep in the closet anymore. No one else ever saw her and weird things rarely happened. We moved a year later and except for the day after we moved, he asked if she can come too. He has never spoken of her again. I was home alone, laying down on my living room floor, and hardcore spacing out at the ceiling. I heard my mother scream on my front porch. I rushed out, but she wasn't there. I ran around the outside of my house. Not a single person in sight. It 10,000% sounded like my mom, and it curdled my bones because it was so raw and animalistic in its sound. I called her right away. Mom picks up the phone and I ask her if she is all right. She responds that she is and tells me to hold on for a minute while she pulls over into the parking lot of a business. She was driving and didn't want to talk on the phone at the same time. Seconds later, I hear a lot of noise and my mom screamed. An eternity stretches on before mom is calm enough to say anything coherent. She goes on to tell me how the car in front of her and the one behind her, before she pulled over, the ones that continued on the same path of travel that she had been on, had been struck by a speeding semi that ran a red light at the next intersection. It was a terrible accident with extensive injuries. The semi clipped the rear of the front vehicle and front of the rear vehicle. My mom's car would have been hit dead center. We always joke that we are psychic, as this is not the first instance like it that we have had, but it was definitely the most freaky of the bunch. TL, DR, I'm psychic and saved my mom's life.